George Clooney and Amal Alamuddin were the embodiment of perfection. He was Hollywood royalty, charming, successful, and effortlessly suave. She was a world-renowned human rights attorney, fighting legal battles that shaped history. Together they were untouchable, a power couple that seemed immune to the usual pitfalls of fame. But then, whispers turned into shocking headlines. Divorce, separation, betrayal. How could this happen? What went so wrong that Clooney, a man who once swore marriage wasn't for him, walked away so suddenly? Was it a hidden scandal? A personal feud? A secret that could no longer be contained? The truth is murky and the rumors are endless, but one thing is clear: this is a breakup no one saw coming. To understand the end, we need to revisit how it all began. For years, George Clooney was Hollywood's most eligible bachelor, a man who seemed allergic to commitment. He dated some of the most beautiful women in the industry, but marriage was never on the table. He famously stated that he wasn't built for it, and after a failed attempt in his younger years, he appeared content living life on his terms. Then, against all odds, everything changed. Enter Amal Alamuddin. She wasn't just another name in a long list of glamorous Hollywood romances. She was different. A brilliant human rights lawyer with an impeccable reputation, Amal was known for taking on some of the world's toughest legal battles. Her intelligence, elegance, and poise set her apart. She wasn't chasing fame, she was shaping history. And somehow, this made her the perfect match for George. Their love story unfolded like a Hollywood script. They met in 2013, introduced by a mutual friend. George later admitted that he was captivated from the start, but winning over Amal wasn't easy. Unlike his past relationships, this wasn't a case of charm and red carpet glamour. She had built a career in a world far removed from his, and the two came from completely different spheres. Yet, they connected. Within months, their relationship became the talk of Hollywood. By 2014, George, the man who vowed never to marry again, was down on one knee. The proposal was as grand as one would expect from a Hollywood legend. Reports suggest it was a carefully planned moment, filled with romance and sentiment. When Amal said yes, it sent shockwaves through the industry. No one thought George would ever settle down, yet here he was, completely smitten. Their wedding was nothing short of spectacular. Venice, one of the most romantic cities in the world, became the backdrop for a lavish multi-day event attended by A-list stars, dignitaries, and high-profile figures. Every detail was perfection, from Amal's stunning designer dress to the breathtaking views of the Grand Canal. They weren't just a couple, they were an event. The world watched, mesmerized, as George and Amal exchanged vows, sealing a union that seemed too perfect to ever break. But perfection can be deceiving. While the world celebrated their love story, some wondered whether George had changed too much, too fast. Was he truly ready to leave behind his bachelor lifestyle? Did Amal fully understand what it meant to be married to a Hollywood icon? Their lives were vastly different. One spent navigating courtrooms, the other spent under studio lights. They made it work in public, but behind the scenes, was it a different story? Even in their happiest moments, there were whispers. Some insiders claimed George struggled with the level of structure and responsibility that came with marriage. Others suggested that Amal, despite her independent nature, found it difficult to balance her demanding career with the pressures of being part of one of the world's most talked about couples. Were there cracks forming beneath the glossy surface? From the very beginning, their love story defied expectations, but as time passed, reality crept in. No amount of luxury or admiration could shield them from the challenges that came with their vastly different lives. Even fairy tales have their struggles, and their marriage soon faces real challenges. From the outside, George and Amal Clooney seemed to have it all. They were the picture of elegance, balancing their high-profile careers with effortless charm. Cameras loved them, the media praised them, and their fans saw them as the ultimate power couple. But beneath the surface, their worlds could not have been more different. Amal's life was built on precision, strategy, and tireless dedication to justice. She handled some of the most high-profile human rights cases in the world, standing in courtrooms where lives were on the line. She wasn't just making speeches at conferences, she was shaping international policies, advising governments, and taking on cases that came with real dangers. Every decision she made carried weight, and every case she took on had consequences far beyond the headlines. George, on the other hand, thrived in the world of Hollywood. His career revolved around film sets, production schedules, and the ever-changing nature of the entertainment industry. He had spent decades in an industry where reinvention was key, where one moment he was directing a film and the next he was walking a red carpet. His life was fast-paced, but in an entirely different way. The stakes were different. His work entertained the world, while Amal's work changed it. At first, they made it look easy. They attended glamorous events, supported each other's causes, and gave the impression of a couple who had seamlessly blended their lives. Amal brought an air of sophistication to George's movie star charm, and George gave Amal a platform beyond the legal world. But as time went on, it became clear that their lives were not built for constant overlap. George's work often required him to travel for months at a time, shooting films in locations all over the world. Amal, meanwhile, was needed in courtrooms and boardrooms, handling legal matters that required her full attention. The physical distance alone created challenges, but it was more than that. Their mindsets were different. Amal's work demanded seriousness, focus, and discretion. George's world was filled with press tours, media engagements, and the relentless nature of Hollywood. Publicly, they continued to be the image of perfection, but behind closed doors, the strain of living in two entirely different worlds started to show. George was used to Hollywood's rhythm, late nights, industry events, and a certain level of freedom. Amal, on the other hand, was bound by strict professional obligations. It wasn't just about where they spent their time, it was about how they saw the world. Amal was deeply invested in fighting for justice, while George, despite his humanitarian work, lived in an industry where appearances often mattered more than reality. Did these differences create an inevitable divide? Could two people who were so powerful in their fields continue to sustain a relationship that required constant compromise? It was one thing to be a glamorous couple in the spotlight, but it was another to maintain a marriage that had to function in opposite worlds. Career clashes were just one part of the problem. Family expectations added even more pressure. The family has always played a significant role in Amal Alamuddin's life. She comes from a prestigious Lebanese family, known for its deep-rooted values, strong traditions, and intellectual legacy. Raised with discipline and a sense of purpose, Amal's upbringing was one of structure, responsibility, and high expectations. Education and achievement were priorities, and her family took pride in their cultural heritage. George, on the other hand, grew up in an entirely different world. Hollywood had shaped him with its unpredictable lifestyle, constant media attention, and an industry that thrived on reinvention. His charm and easygoing nature had made him a global star, but it also meant that his world was vastly different from Amal's. Their marriage was not just a blending of two individuals, it was a merging of two cultures, two upbringings, and two opposing ideas of what family life should be. At first, these differences didn't seem to matter. They appeared to respect each other's backgrounds, celebrating their unique identities. But over time, the reality of their differences became harder to ignore. One of the biggest challenges came when they welcomed their twins, Alexander and Ella, in 2017. Parenthood is never easy, but for George and Amal, it became a point of tension. Amal, driven by discipline and structure, reportedly wanted to raise their children with a strong academic foundation, cultural awareness, and a clear sense of responsibility. She believed in a more traditional, hands-on approach, one that aligned with her upbringing. George, on the other hand, had a more relaxed attitude. His Hollywood lifestyle had always been about freedom and creativity, and he carried that into his parenting style. He wanted his children to have a fun, light-hearted upbringing, free from excessive pressure. The media didn't help matters. Every public appearance and every decision they made regarding their children was scrutinized. Were the twins going to be raised in America or Europe? Would they follow in Amal's intellectual footsteps or embrace the more carefree Hollywood way of life? Speculation about their parenting styles became a constant topic, and the pressure only grew. Some reports suggested that George struggled with the structured family life that Amal envisioned. For decades, he had lived on his terms, answering to no one. Now he was expected to adapt to a life that required routine, discipline, and responsibility beyond his film career. It was a shift he may not have been fully prepared for. Amal, on the other hand, had built her career around structure and order, and she expected the same stability in her home life. Did these internal family conflicts contribute to their separation? Marriage is hard enough without the weight of clashing cultures, different parenting philosophies, and constant public scrutiny. While family pressures mounted, another problem was brewing, one that no marriage could easily survive. For a couple that seemed untouchable, whispers of scandal came as a shock. When the first rumors surfaced, fans dismissed them as typical tabloid gossip, but as more reports emerged, the speculation took on a life of its own. Could there have been a betrayal that shattered George and Amal's seemingly perfect marriage? And if so, what or who was responsible? One theory revolved around trust issues. Despite his reputation as a devoted husband, George had spent decades in an industry built on close, often intense relationships with co-stars. His charm and natural chemistry with leading ladies had always been a part of his appeal, but could it have caused problems in his marriage? Julia Roberts, a longtime friend and frequent collaborator, quickly became a focal point of speculation. She and George had worked together on multiple films, and their friendship spanned over 2 decades. They had always been open about their playful banter, their shared sense of humor, and the bond they had developed over years of working side by side. To outsiders, it looked like harmless camaraderie, but behind the scenes, did Amal see it differently? Reports suggested that their closeness may have led to tension. Amal, who built her career on serious, high-stakes legal work, had little patience for Hollywood games. Her world was one of diplomacy and law, where relationships were built on professionalism and discretion. George's easygoing friendships with his female co-stars, marked by public praise, inside jokes, and affectionate interviews, stood in stark contrast to that. Then, there were the more extreme rumors. Some sources claimed that a particular event, an overheard conversation, a private revelation, or even an unexpected discovery had led to an explosive argument between George and Amal. The details varied, but the theme remained the same. Trust had been broken, and Amal was unwilling to ignore it. The internet was flooded with wild theories. Some speculated that George's past relationships, though long over, had left lingering insecurities. Others suggested that Amal's demanding schedule and international commitments had made their marriage vulnerable to outside influences. Every move they made was dissected, every interaction scrutinized for hidden meaning. But what was the truth? Had their marriage fallen apart due to a real betrayal, or was it simply the weight of public expectation fueling endless speculation? One thing was clear: something had changed. The once flawless public image of their relationship had started to crack, and whether or not there was a definitive scandal, the damage was done. But beyond the rumors, another harsh reality played a major role in their downfall. George Clooney spent decades insisting he wasn't built for marriage. He had seen Hollywood relationships fall apart time and time again and had no interest in becoming another casualty of the industry. He enjoyed his freedom, his career, and his carefully crafted life. For years, he was content dodging questions about settling down, making it clear that marriage wasn't in his plans. Then, against all odds, he met Amal. The relationship seemed to change everything. Suddenly, the man who had sworn off marriage was planning a wedding in Venice, and the world couldn't believe it. But looking back, did George truly change his mind? Or did he get caught up in the idea of something new and different? Amal was unlike anyone he had ever dated before, brilliant, accomplished, and admired for more than just her beauty. Did he convince himself he was ready for something he never truly wanted? At the time, it seemed like a fairy tale, but as the years passed, the reality of marriage set in. George had spent most of his life doing exactly what he wanted, when he wanted. He traveled, worked, and lived on his terms. Marriage required compromise, and for someone who had built an entire existence around independence, that wasn't easy. Then there was the issue of pace. Amal's career was only growing. She was taking on more high-profile cases, traveling for international conferences, and continuing to make her mark in the legal world. Meanwhile, George, after years of dominating Hollywood, was slowing down. He had reached a point where he didn't need to chase roles or prove himself. He wanted to step back, enjoy life, and embrace a quieter, more private existence. This shift may have created an unavoidable rift. Amal was still climbing, still pushing forward, still fully immersed in her career. George, on the other hand, may have realized he was ready for something else entirely. If their visions for the future are no longer aligned, how could their marriage continue to work? The pressures of fame only added to the strain. Their relationship had never been private. Every aspect of their marriage was scrutinized, every move they made dissected by the public. For Amal, who had spent her life in the legal world rather than the entertainment industry, this level of attention was overwhelming. For George, after years of Hollywood fame, it may have been exhausting. Did he reach a breaking point? After years of fighting the idea of marriage, did he wake up one day and realize he had been right all along? Some insiders believe George simply wasn't built for the life he tried to embrace, and the weight of expectation became too much. With the divorce rumors reaching a boiling point, how did it all unravel so quickly? The world was caught off guard when reports surfaced claiming George Clooney had filed for divorce. The headlines were explosive. A couple that once seemed untouchable had reached the breaking point. But what exactly pushed them over the edge? Was there a single, defining moment that shattered everything? Or had their marriage been crumbling behind closed doors for years? Speculation ran wild. Some sources insisted it all came down to an explosive fight, an argument so intense that it left no room for reconciliation. Others suggested a quieter, more gradual unraveling, where the emotional distance between them grew until there was nothing left to save. But one thing remained consistent in every version of events. Something had changed, and it had changed fast. Insiders began to leak details about the couple's final days together. Amal, known for her composure and grace, was reportedly devastated. She had built a life with George, believed in their partnership, and never expected their story to end so suddenly. George, on the other hand, was described as distant and detached, as if he had already made peace with the decision long before anyone else saw it coming. Some reports suggested that George had reached his limit, that a specific event, whether personal, professional, or private, had finally pushed him to make a choice. Others hinted that Amal had been the one unwilling to compromise any further, leaving George with no option but to walk away. As the media frenzy intensified, both remained silent. There were no public statements, no dramatic interviews, just the endless speculation of what had gone wrong. The world had seen them as a perfect match, but now they were reduced to yet another Hollywood love story that had ended in heartbreak. Was this truly a single moment that changed everything? Or had their fate been sealed long before the news broke? The truth may never be fully known, but one question remains: what's next for George and Amal? In the aftermath of their shocking split, George Clooney and Amal Alamuddin now face a future apart. But what comes next for them as individuals? Amal, ever the dedicated professional, continues her legal work, advocating for justice on a global scale. Her career has never been defined by her marriage, and despite the media frenzy surrounding her personal life, she remains committed to making a difference. She has always been a force in the legal world, and even without George by her side, her influence is undeniable. George, on the other hand, seems to be taking a step back. He has spent decades in the limelight, but now he appears to be distancing himself from the Hollywood chaos that once defined him. Will he retreat into a quieter life away from constant scrutiny, or will he reinvent himself once again? Unlike Amal, whose work is rooted in real-world impact, George can fade into the background if he chooses. The question is, does he want to? And then comes the speculation. Could they ever reconcile? Some couples find their way back to each other after time apart, but in this case, does that seem realistic? The differences that pulled them apart, their careers, their lifestyles, and their conflicting visions of the future are not the kind that simply disappears. If anything, they may only become more pronounced over time. Public perception will also play a role in how their story is remembered. Will they be seen as a couple who simply grew apart, or will rumors of betrayal and conflict overshadow the truth? Hollywood has a way of rewriting narratives, and as time passes, their love story may be reshaped in ways neither of them can control. One thing is certain, their split will have a lasting impact not just on their personal lives, but on how they navigate their respective careers. Amal, despite her success, will forever be linked to George in the eyes of the public. George, despite his legacy, will always be asked about the woman who made him rethink his bachelor status. Was their love story always destined to fall apart, or was it simply another casualty of Hollywood's harsh reality? Perhaps they were never meant to last, or perhaps they were two people who loved deeply but couldn't overcome the weight of their differences. Not every love story ends with a happily ever after, but that doesn't make it any less significant.